Wave to the people.
I'm getting worse at these. Yeah. Blow them kisses. We're joined tonight by Steven Kush. So,
what's up, guys? Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Glad to have you on.
Yeah, great to have you, man.
Yeah. So I don't know what's going on. You guys having a good start to your season and herp season and breeding season, or whatever season you choose to talk about, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, good so far on the herping front. I haven't gotten out too much yet. Got out locally, saw a couple blacktails for about a month ago, so that was good. But hopefully here soon can make some time to do some clob hikes, lep hikes, and stuff like that. So I'm hoping this will be a good herping year.
Nice. The blacktails, the eastern or the
it's kind of like the intergrade in between like ornatus and molossus zone, where they're kind of like brown and tan. Okay. You're not really getting the gold, but not really the silver like the true ornatus. So kind of like between here and like parts of New Mexico, where they're kind of this like nebulous in between stage.
Oh, cool. Have they done any genetic studies on those? Or do they key out one or the other, or are they just
not to my knowledge,
like a true intergrade zone?
Maybe it needs to be another subspecies, or I mean, to me, they seem more molossus like than ornatus like, but they're you're not getting that vibrant gold of the Arizona molossus. You do once you get over into New Mexico, kind of closer to the Arizona border, but even in between like mountain ranges that are really tightly kind of placed together, there's some pretty extreme phenotypical differences. So like from right there kind of over to where I am, it's kind of strange on the blacktail front.
Okay, that's cool. Yeah, I really like those ornatus out in West Texas. They're nice looking snakes for sure. But then again, a high elevation yellow, blacktail from Arizona is pretty sweet to look at too. So
yeah. I love them all. They're some of my favorite rattlesnakes, and to me, they're like the most curious snake I've ever had the chance to interact with. They're always trying to figure out what's going on. They're always watching you, but in a way where it's just curiosity. I feel like it's not defensiveness or super high strung feeding response. It's just like you open an enclosure and it just kind of meanders out towards you, slowly tongue flicking. Like most snakes don't do that, but there's a curiosity to the snakes I really like.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. The ones, so we didn't see many on some of the first trips that I did with Rob down in Arizona. We didn't see too many. I think did we even get one the first couple trips we did down there? A blacktail, at least a live one. We saw a DOR that had just been hit. That was kind of a bummer. But
not on the first one, but on the second one, I think.
Okay. And then the last one that we went on together, we saw a couple high elevation ones that were they were big too, and they were up kind of in price eye habitat. And then we saw them, just same area as the price eye, and they were huge and nice and yellow. Yeah. But same kind of thing. They were pretty chill, like didn't rattle or strike, or they just kind of like, oh, you're going to take pictures of me. Cool. Like when I first spotted the first one, it kind of did a little kind of a semi buzz and then started making for cover. But it was pretty chill.
Yeah.
Took some pictures and turned it back.
So
and it was cool.
Can you hear me?
You're kind of delayed. I'm not sure what's going on. Yeah. I can hear you, but you're delayed. So sorry. Anyway, that I got out a couple days ago. I went out, there's this garter den, not too far from my place. And so, I went out and did a little herping for some garter snakes. It's an area where the Sertalis and elegans overwinter together. So the valley and the red-sided garter snakes.
Okay,
so
cool.
Kind of cool.
Yeah.
I mean, nothing too crazy exciting, but it's fun to see. I saw probably a dozen snakes on the day.
Yeah.
And, just in a small area. So there's like a culvert with where they overwinter under the road out there. So it's a fun little spot. But
that's awesome.
Yeah, they did some construction on that culvert, and maybe 5-10 years ago, you could see like 50 snakes in a day, like in just this one little area. But the numbers have gone way down since they reconstructed or improved the culvert going to the road. So it's kind of a bummer. But
yeah, it makes sense. So.
Yeah, got some pretty decent pictures of both the Sertalis and the Elegans. So
cool.
Nice.
That's awesome.
But that's about all I've done. I did try to go out in the West Desert, down just south of the Great Salt Lake, and flipped a few rocks looking for some. I need to find a milk snake. It's killing me that I haven't seen a Utah tricolor yet. So I'm making an effort to do that. We're going to go down next weekend and try
That's awesome.
Get some spots that I've been looking at on Google Earth or whatever. But
cool.
This last time I only found a western skink and a sagebrush lizard, but that was about it. So give it another shot.
Cool.
But yeah, I'm excited to get into herping season. Leave for Australia in 2 weeks, so it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, I bet that is. I wish I could say the same.
Yeah, it's definitely recommended. It's a great place to herp for sure. So, yep. And then Rob and I are headed over there in October, kind of the end of the year. So
okay,
that'll be fun to get over twice.
Yeah, it's a good year. 2 Australia trips. Can't complain with that.
Yeah. Rob, you're taking off soon for some herping soon, right?
Yeah, Southern California. To do,
Nice.
Got to try and add Ruber and Helleride to the list. Keep ticking through the U.S. Crotalus and
hell yeah,
U.S. Venomous. However, that's how Nipper's pushing to do it or whatever. But yeah, hopefully continue to maintain a lead over you there. I know we're pretty close on that, so all good. And yeah, hopefully it comes up. And if we see Rosy Boas and other Zanata specs in a new place, all that stuff would be cool as well.
Yeah.
We saw a nice spec down there that's really red, kind of pinkish color. It was really a nice looking snake for sure. So yeah, I hope you find a lot of good stuff. That's a fun area to herp for sure. Yeah. Well, and I started getting eggs. I got to watch one of my wheat belt Stimson's pythons push out an egg or two the other night while I was out there cleaning and feeding. So it was pretty sweet. She laid 16 eggs, I think. So not a bad clutch from a little Antaresia. But
I wouldn't have guessed that they would have that many eggs.
Yeah, I've gotten close to 20 out of a female or two.
Wow.
Yeah, they can lay a few eggs, so it's kind of nice. But I just shipped out a dozen or so snakes last week or earlier this week, so that was nice to move a few animals and clear some stuff out before I leave for Australia. But yeah, I think I have about 5 clutches in the incubator right now, so we're off to an okay start. The first 2 clutches have kind of crashed a bit. I only have a couple eggs from each of those 2 Woma clutches, so that's kind of a bummer. I had a nice clutch of 9, and I thought they looked really good, but they started going bad pretty quick, so I've only got 3 left from that, so I'm kind of bummed out. But I've got 1 more Woma to lay, and then the blackhead should be laying soon too, so yep. Fingers crossed for a decent year.
Yeah.
Got to get some good blackheads to hatch out. Yeah. So how's it looking for your scrubs this year? Think you're going to...
Yeah, I'm definitely a not count my eggs before they hatch kind of guy. But I guess what I'll say is it's been a strange year. Not in a bad way on all fronts, but since I moved in the fall, I was like, I'm not sure how breeding season is going to go. A lot of people will say, okay, you're moving, you got to take the year off because nothing's going to breed anyway. And when I was leaving Indiana, coming out here to Texas, I'm like, I don't have a job. I'm trying to do this snake thing and see how long I can make it last for. So I'm like, I need to do something. I can't just not breed snakes and expect to pay my bills breeding snakes. So I kind of came up with a bit of like a cycling plan that coincided with the move, to try to use it to my advantage if possible. And I might move every year forever now. So
really,
yeah, I mean, I've had some stuff come up along the way that I think has a lot to do with the climate shift and how dry it is out here and stuff like that. But all things considered, when the season's over, I'll be like, this is by I mean, a long shot, the best breeding year I've ever had. So this is probably like, I would say already now, if it stopped right now, this was like my dreams, the season I've been hoping for since I started keeping scrub pythons. So, but yeah, I should have my first babies hatching not too long from now. So I don't want to jinx myself, but
yeah.
It'll be soon.
Which species?
So this year it'll probably be everything will kind of fall under Amethystina, but a few different localities. So like the Barnecks of different varieties, Maruki, southern types, the Wamina or Jayapura, which they probably are Jayapura, but the hobby calls them Waminas. The Highland type, Oxabil, Tanamera, Tamika, whatever you want to call it, like the orange Highland scrub pythons. Maybe it's a maybe on Clastolepis, maybe on Moluccans. But yeah, I guess it's what happens when you have a lot of them, a lot of snakes. Eventually, lots of snakes breed. So
yeah,
I just hope I can take some different things from this year and just be able to apply them going forward to be like, hey, maybe I'm one step closer to really having it figured out. So
that's cool. Nice. Yeah, that's exciting here. I thought the rule of thumb was when you move, you have to add 5 years to your scrub breeding. That's interesting that they got them kind of kicked into gear when you moved.
Yeah, I mean, I was looking back on it. The first time I bred scrub pythons was in 2020. It was a female that I got her almost probably a year or maybe 13 months before I moved. So I got her in Chicago, moved to Indianapolis. So like I moved her about 2 months after I got her. She got shipped in from California. And then almost a year after I acquired her, she laid eggs.
Wow. So
the move coincided with that. I had gotten some adult females that laid 6 months after acquiring them. And I have 2 other friends who bred scrub pythons who bred them on years when they moved. So I don't know. This might be the trick with scrub pythons. You can never stay in one place. Or I'll pack up all my adults and drive to Austin and feel like, all right, it's a new spot. Now you guys know what to do.
Yeah. That's crazy. Huh? Yeah. Very cool. That's an interesting thing.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'll take it. I'm not going to complain at all.
Nice. Well, I'll hope to have some photos to send you of some King Horneye in their natural habitat. So we'll be up in Cairns area and looking for scrubs for sure. So
yeah, Rob sent me some pictures recently from an old trip, and definitely very jealous. But it's so cool to see that. I can imagine what it would feel like to roll up on one of those animals and just know what it took for that experience to happen, and how far you had to travel, and how you had to plan life around leaving for a different continent, and now you found that snake you were looking for. So
right, yeah, it's pretty sweet. I was riding, Rico Walder.
Yeah, of course.
I was riding with him. We were driving back from a spot in the Tablelands, and I was driving, but I was getting really tired, so I pulled over and let him drive. And we'd been out, herping all night, and then so he's cruising along, and I was like, "Are you sure you're good?" Because I'm kind of going in and out, like kind of dozing here and there, and trying to stay awake, but not being very successful at it. All of a sudden, he just lays on the brakes, and we just come skidding to a halt, maybe like 4 inches from this huge scrub that was pretty much across the whole road. I think it's the biggest scrub that I've seen in Australia. It was pretty sweet, but he avoided hitting it, and we got out and kind of played with it a little bit. And
how big was it?
We didn't measure it, but at least, 10, 12 feet, maybe more. I can't remember, but yeah, it was a good sized snake,
Yeah.
But I was just glad it wasn't a roadkill after we passed through there, but yeah. And it was funny because Alan Rapace was driving through the same area on his way back. They were taking a different road back, but and he's like a rally car drive, like he drives desert roads, he does the Baja 1000 and stuff, so he knows how to drive on roads. So he was cruising through this jungle dirt road and did the same thing, like just screeched to a halt, and he's just thinking, I know I hit it, I was so close. And they got out and it was just like under, like just right in front of the tire.
Oh wow,
barely missed it. So
Jeez.
Yeah, he's like, I'm so glad I didn't kill that. You just don't live it down when you run over a big snake that you can't miss, across the whole road.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine how that would feel. I don't want to experience that.
Yeah, our big one was similar to that, where it was the end of the night, going back to the stay. At the end, we'd seen one that had been a mid-sized one that had been smashed, wasn't there on the way out, and, was smashed in the road on the way in, which is super frustrating. But like we were not actively herping. We're just driving down the highway, and it's just the pure instinct reaction of, because it was only, despite being 10, 11 feet long, it was only the first 18 inches of its body that were on the road. And it's just sort of at the last second, you see it, you tweak by it, and then you pull over or whatever. And it was like, yeah, hopefully I didn't hit that. And then there's an oncoming car. So I'm running down the highway, waving my arms as in the lane, saying, you're definitely not going to hit this thing. Presuming you're not willing to take me out, then you're not going to hit this thing after I just that barely instant reaction to miss it. So, and it was all good. And for, then I was like, well, we're getting right off the road, and it thanked me for the pleasure by putting, whatever, it's probably 3.5 inch long head, and just popped me right on the mid calf. And it was like, oh, well, all good. As you say, it was a lot of time and effort, money sacrificed on many people's parts to be there, and it was totally worth it. Then when I was holding it, it was like I had put it around my neck, and when Chris Salemi had walked by, it backed up into my chest, and then I thought, well, if it does that to my face, that might be a bit of an issue going through customs, the next day. What happened to your face, mate? That sort of thing. So made me think about my choices a little bit more after that, but it was all good.
That's crazy.
Hell yeah.
That's what it's all about. Getting those, stories from the field, getting out in the field and seeing stuff in the wild. It's the great stuff. It's too bad New Guinea's not a little safer. I'd like to make it up there someday, but yeah. I don't know. That seems, listening to Ari on your podcast, he's not recommending heading over there.
No, he's not.
I'm sure there's probably some areas you can go to where it's not as bad, but
I got to assume it's kind of like Mexico, where like it has this allure of like you're gonna end up in the back of a pickup truck if you go down there. But they're big countries, and there's big cities, and inevitably there's got to be places that are more tourist friendly than others. So
right, yeah.
But I feel like that might not be easy to find out.
Yeah. Seems like there's a lot of birders that go over there and do
birders go and stuff. Anywhere. They're far more intense than we are. A bird will go into a volcano if someone says there's a bird in there.
Well, you're talking to a birder here, so he, maybe. Do you feel seen, Dr. J?
Yeah. I don't think I'd call myself a full birder, but I call it winter herping when I go look at birds when it's too cold to look for snakes and lizards. Yeah. But no, I've kind of gotten into it. It's pretty addicting to, just like herping, you want to find as many species as you can and tick them off your list. And so, man, birder, there's so many birding apps, and there's a lot of tools for birders. It's just, I wish the herping, was similar, but I guess there's more of a concern. Birders can't usually take the birds home. They don't poach the birds or over collect an area, because it's a lot harder to collect a bird than it is a snake. So
that is true. That's a good point.
That's the difference.
Good point.
It would be nice if we could treat herping the same that we treat birding, and that we didn't have to worry about those things. You could just say, hey, I saw this cool snake. It's under this rock in this area, go check it out because it's amazing. But
would you say birders are a lot more open with their information than herpers are?
It seems like it. Yeah. I mean, there's I follow this Facebook page called Utah Rare Bird Alert, and they'll tell you, oh, I just saw this rare bird at this spot, here's the coordinates, go see if you can find it, that kind of thing. So, and I followed one of those. It was just up the street from the university I work at. And so I went up there with my binoculars and hung out for a bit. And sure enough, this bird that was like an East Coast bird that had made its way somehow over to almost the West Coast was hanging out. So I got some pictures of it and went back to work.
That's awesome.
It was kind of cool.
Oh, yeah.
Some sort of warbler. I think it was like a black fronted blue warbler or something like that. As Rob would call it, a flyy bird. It was a flyy bird. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, it's I had the pleasure of meeting you in at Herpaton in Southern California back a few years ago. So, and then I caught your podcast. I didn't realize you had your own corner over there. So I started going back through the interviews you've done. It was really impressive. I mean, great stuff. So, and just through that, I just hear all this experience, and I mean, you just have a wealth of experience with a lot of different things. And I mean, you're not that old. How old are you?
I'm 23.
Okay. Yeah, you're pretty young. So to have that much experience is pretty impressive for a 23-year-old for sure. So, but yeah, we wanted to have you on. Why don't you kind of tell us kind of where you fit in herpetoculture and what's your deal?
Now I'm just, I'm a guy in the desert these days with scrub pythons and rattlesnakes and a few other things.
What took you out to Texas, or why'd you move down?
For a handful of reasons. Texas for a while for me has been like the destination for reptiles. I have a pretty decent sized venomous collection, and there aren't many states that are too accommodating of that. And of the states that are accommodating of that, I feel like Texas is head and shoulders the best state. That coupled with the herping, obviously, out here in West Texas, I'm a stone's throw away from, banded rock rattlesnakes, mottled rock rattlesnakes, blacktails, diamondbacks, prairies, a bunch of different colubrids, and so and a lot of stuff that I keep, to see it in the wild. It's pretty special. And then another thing that I kind of was always thinking about, and from like a longevity standpoint, is, I feel like for the last couple of years, there haven't been many threats on like our rights of keeping reptiles at a national level. Back in 2021, there was national bill, state bills all over the place. Very, very coordinated attack on the industry, which, luckily we made it through. But it makes you think, okay, what happens when that doesn't actually work? And now we're landlocked in our particular states. And the way I see it, the only two states, or probably three states, that have a sustainable market, if that were to happen, are Florida, Texas, and California. And of those three states, for what I mean, Florida, 90% of my collection is illegal in Florida, considering that Somalia amethystina is illegal in Florida, and that's most of my scrub pythons, which are most of my snakes. Yeah. And then the venomous thing, it's another half of my collection. So, and then, California is great, but it's prohibitive for cost of living, yada, yada, yada. Yeah. And then you can only keep native venomous and then heloderma and whatnot. So again, there goes a majority of my collection. Process of elimination, Texas. Yeah. But yeah, and I hate the cold. So
yeah.
That's why Texas.
That's cool. Yeah. I mean, that's a very good reason to go to Texas for sure. I mean, that's, and I mean, it's sad that we have to kind of consider those kind of things, but that's the way it is these days. So,
yeah.
I mean, I agree. That's a good place to be as far as herping goes, aside from all the, the private land. Hopefully you can make some friends down there that have property that you can herp on, because craning your neck, risking getting hit by a semi truck is not all that enjoyable herping. It has its merit and its place, but I prefer cruising through habitat, not being confined to roadsides.
Yeah, for sure. No, I'm lucky. I have friends who know people, and so I'll be able to see some cool stuff. I guess I'll say that. I'm lucky, very lucky in that way.
That's cool. Yeah, I just found out one of my friends bought a bunch of land in Texas with just prime habitat. It's beautiful.
Oh, wow.
He's like,
that's awesome.
He's like, yeah, you'll have to come out. I'm like, yes, I would love that. That sounds wonderful. So yeah, really cool guy. So that's who I'm herping with next weekend. So
wow, awesome.
Hopefully I can make it down there and check his place out. But yeah, it's just this prime habitat, nice canyons and close to the river.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah,
that's so cool.
Pretty dreamland down there. So, yeah. And so now, are you a full-time reptile breeder? Is that kind of?
Yeah, that's what I've been doing for the last 7 to 10 months or so. I was a full-time, moving operation, and then I was snakes, because that was a lot. I was close to 1,300 miles across country with 240 snakes and all of their enclosures. So
that's got to be
that
rough.
that was a lot. And so I definitely I'm glad to have some time of not doing that. But yeah, since then, just been living off the snakes, and it's worked so far. Obviously it's not, we'll get into it. I guess that's why I'm here. But right. It definitely is not the most surefire business model. I guess I'll say that for the time being.
Before you know what side you're on.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not really sure. How do I feel about my career?
No, I mean, it does have its challenges, but it also has some, nice rewards. So it can work out nicely.
But I'm very fortunate for being as young as I am. I was in the feeder business for better part of 5 years, and before that was kind of in the zoological world in high school. So I've seen a few different aspects of this, and pretty deeply to be being as young as I am. So I'm really grateful I've been able to gain that perspective and have those experiences to kind of shape where I want to go, and it's been super valuable. So very lucky.
What experience did you have with the zoological community?
So in high school, I worked for Rob Carmichael at the Wildlife Discovery Center. It was a small facility outside of Chicago in a suburb called Lake Forest. But it was awesome. I was 13 years old and walking into this place. I didn't know it existed before, and there were big bushmasters, Mangshan vipers, king cobras, a bunch of different rattlesnake species, and big crocodilians, large pythons, monitors, birds of prey. There was a bobcat there that I grew to love, and I'm just like, wow, this is heaven for someone who's my age and is as interested in this as I was. So started volunteering there right before my freshman year of high school. And then as soon as I was old enough, became an employee and did that throughout high school. And then tried college very briefly. And then I was like, nope, this is the academic route's not going to be my route, at least not right now. And then by then I was good friends with Forrest Fanning, and then kind of together decided I was going to go work for him, and started off, I was going to be doing reptile stuff. And within about a month I was managing the rodent operation. So a little bait and switch there, but learned everything about breeding rodents and that industry, which is, that to me was like my college. I learned how to, not only about the rodents, but how to run a business, manage people, how to, very, very steep learning curve thrown in the deep end, but sometimes that's the best type of learning. So definitely was very, very, it was an opportunity that I was able to take advantage of and learn a lot from.
That's awesome. Yeah. What better mentor too. I mean, Forrest was just a great guy. Like he was just so personable and excited about everything. It was infectious. Yeah. I could see how he would talk you into running the rodent facility. How do you say no to that guy? Right.
Well, I mean, I was there, and I was there for what they were doing. And I wanted to learn it as well. I never wanted to just be zookeeper, reptile guy. Being in that area in high school, I was like, okay, I see all these people who are going down the biology track and they're going to get their internship at the zoo. And by the time they're 28, maybe they can land a job making $30,000 a year. Yeah. Not for me. As much as I love zoos and I love that community. I mean, I just did a show with Dennis McNamara last night. He's the curator of reptiles at the Virginia Zoo. Like it's a part of the herpetoculture world I really admire, and I was glad to be a part of. But I knew that wasn't what I wanted to do in the long run. But yeah, it was a great opportunity for me to get in somewhere where I didn't need some sort of extensive education or whatnot, which is kind of one of the cool parts of the private sector. It can be good, and it can also be very bad, I guess, depending on how that system is used. But yeah, what I learned from him that was the most valuable was just this self-marketing, how to make connections at the shows and stuff like that. Because he was so good at that, at the social aspect of knowing everybody and, getting to know people who he wanted to know for, make business connections and personal connections, get access to different animals and facilities he had interest in and stuff like that. So it was really cool to see that, because that's something that I felt like I might not even still be very good at, but definitely wasn't back when I was younger, especially being like a teenager in the industry. I grew up 45 minutes from Tinley Park. So the first Tinley Park I went to, I was like 10 years old, and nobody would talk to me. And rightfully so. I'm most of the 10-year-olds who are running around those shows, they don't care. They think it's cool for now, and then they're going to, find the next thing next year. But having him as a mentor definitely helped me kind of evolve as far as the networking side and all that went. So that was something that I really was able to derive a lot of value from.
That's cool. Yeah. My buddy, Steve Sharp, he, did kind of the same thing as you. He was 10 years old and he was breeding leopard geckos and like selling them to people. And he had some local, I can't remember who that was local to him, that kind of guided him through being a reptile breeder, but he was this 10-year-old and he's shipping out geckos or selling geckos. And then they'd find out he's 10 and they're like, wait a second, I'm buying stuff from a 10-year-old. Like, wait, how's this working? Yeah. Maybe it was like 12, but same kind of thing. Like,
yeah,
people would find out and just wait, he's way too young. What's going on here? Yeah. But,
I was lucky that I kind of developed early. By the time I was like 13 years old, I was about 6'1" or so. So I looked a lot older than I was. Yeah, and then I just had to learn how to act like I was older than I was. So by the time anyone figured out how young I was, they're like, well, you've been here for long enough, whatever. Why change anything now?
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. Well, I mean, your background, that's kind of the impetus for this fight is between kind of debating whether or not, the merits of running a business that focuses on reptile breeding or running a business that kind of focuses on supporting reptiles like feeders and supplies and things like that.
Yeah.
I mean, you've had experience on both sides. So, I wanted to get your input on that and kind of, we'll throw in some of our ideas here and there as well. But yeah, that's kind of the main thing is,
cool.
So yeah, Rob and I will go ahead and flip a coin, see who gets to debate you. Sure. Rob's been having some rough luck on the coin toss. Oops. Okay, go ahead.
I trust that will continue. I will switch it up and go tails.
It is tails. You got the flip.
That being said, it seems like I'm having connectivity issues, so I'm going to defer to you, and maybe I'll jump in as appropriate. The weird bit to me, it seems like it's you, Dr. J, but I will take it. Steven looks perfectly clear. I look perfectly clear, but it is what it is. I will defer for the quality of the audio. Fingers crossed, hopefully.
Yeah, I'm still nervous that mine's not going to record. We recorded a couple weeks back a great episode with Ron St. Pierre, and my audio didn't work. So I didn't see like the little green line coming up in the side. So I moved closer to the mic just to make sure it was working, and something was recording. But okay, yeah, I don't know what the deal is. I just see a delay, but I don't have that with Steven. So
do I have green lines coming up in the corner?
You got green lines, yeah. So I think we're all good. I hope so. I'm just like nervous now. That's the first time that's happened, so I'm not sure what transpired there. But all right, go ahead and call it.
Heads.
It is heads. I'm a double loser this week. So all right, what do you want to go for? Reptiles or supplies?
I'll do the supplies side.
Okay. All right. Well, and I mean, I don't really have much experience in supplies, so that's probably a good thing.
There we go.
Get more from that, I think. So now,
prepared for both sides. So yeah. I think I'll.
There you go. And I'm happy to hear your thoughts on the reptile side too. So yeah, don't feel bad for losing a few points by giving some good. Fight side to my side. But as the coin toss winner, you get to decide if you go first or if you defer to me to go first. So
I'll defer.
Okay. I guess I would start out. The argument for breeding reptiles is probably the variety. There's lots of different ways you can go and different species you can keep and different markets you can kind of get into. If you want to go mainstream, there's the ball pythons, leopard geckos, crested geckos, colubrids, that kind of thing. And if you want to be kind of a niche breeder, you've got, endless opportunities for that too. And there's, different groups, and you can really, I don't know, I always thought you needed to kind of follow the market, but the more I see people kind of following those niche markets and doing kind of what they love, the more I'm starting to question that. So I don't know. I think the risk, of course, is when those things fall out of favor, you have to have something to fall back on. But for the most part, you can usually find people, especially like you kind of mentioned earlier, you have to have personality and kind of almost build your market to some extent, get people excited in what you're working with. And I think there's some really good examples of people who are doing that.
Yeah.
So I think just the fact that there's a nice variety of different things to work with. If you kind of don't like the crowd that likes a certain type of snake or lizard that you're breeding, you can move on to like the tortoise group or something else. There's always, another group or another people. And it's interesting too that they don't often communicate. Like if you're a python guy, you're usually not chatting with the tortoise guys and that kind of thing. So it's kind of an interesting dynamic. So it's almost like, several different markets within one, depending on what species group or what, class of reptile you choose. So I think that's how I'd open up, as a nice variety for whatever floats your boat and whatever keeps your interest, I guess.
Yeah. So I guess my counter, my first point, I think probably the strongest one is that, especially in terms of feeders, supplies, yes, as well, but definitely feeders. It's the recession proof part of what we do. It's not a luxury good like reptiles are. 2008 happens again. You're still feeding your animals. You might not be buying new animals, but you're still feeding them. I hope you're feeding them. You should feed them. For anyone listening, feed your animals. But yeah, that's the strongest part is they sell themselves. There's always a need. If you can reach your clientele, you got them. And at this point in time, especially with the feeder industry, it's majority about accessibility, price, convenience, customer service. I think for now, the customer base is a little less focused on quality of product. I feel like, well, and this might not be, but this, I'll say for what it is. I feel like this, where the reptile industry is now, is where dog food probably was like 15 years ago. Mm-hmm. Because now you see, ads on TV and on the biggest podcast for natural dog food and stuff like that. Where, growing up, my mom was very progressive and she wanted to feed our dogs raw food. And when people would find out, they're like, what are you feeding your dog? But now fast forward 10 years, 15 years later, and that's almost commonplace. And if you don't feed your dog some specialized diet, you're considered a bad dog owner, by many. And, I'm not passing judgment on anyone's dogs. I'm just drawing a comparison. But yeah, I think the biggest thing is that it will, at any scale that you're at, there will always be a need for the product, no matter how the economy is doing otherwise. That medium rat might be 50 cents less than it was 2 years ago or more, but that snake still needs to eat that medium rat. So yeah, for me, that's the number one pro over the reptiles for like a feeder business or a supply business, is that even when the snakes and lizards stop selling, feeders don't stop selling.
Yeah. No, I definitely concede that point. That's probably the most strong case, and it's also the reason I breed my own rodents to feed my stuff, because I don't want to pay the prices that it costs. I want to kind of be in control of what goes into my rodents and that kind of thing. So it's but yeah, there's always a need for, most people don't have the capacity to have a bunch of stinky rodents in their garage, and I just. Maybe this is kind of an argument against rodents, but I just had a bunch chew their way out of a tub, and then they chewed all the water lines and all that kind of stuff. So it can be a headache at times, and it's very, but I think that kind of leads into my next point of, why reptiles over rodents and other feeders is that you can usually, the mammals, the rodents need a lot more care and a lot more attention, certainly, versus reptiles that you can leave for a week or two and go on a herp trip. You're kind of tied to the mammals, the rodents. They don't let you leave as often, and if you do, there's often problems. And also, it's kind of hard to find people that are excited to work with rodents versus reptiles, I would think. Sure. If you're trying to hire employees for a big business, you're going to have a fairly decent line waiting to work with reptiles versus rodents, I would think. So, and again, I don't have any experience with that, so you might call me on my BS. I might be talking out my butt.
I wish I could use that one to my advantage in this conversation, but
yeah,
that will not be one of my points.
It's hard to kind of get and keep good employees for a rodent business, I would imagine. But then again, people aren't probably, and if they do steal a rodent here or there, it's probably not going to do much to you. But if they, switch out a het for a normal and steal the het, I've heard examples of that so I guess this is a point against the reptile side, but sometimes your employees will bring your business down a bit by having sticky fingers, let's say. So I've heard some interesting stories about that, where people bought hets that didn't turn out to be hets and were actually normals because the employee swapped out a normal for a het and took the het home and bred it themselves.
And then all of a sudden a different breeder has a new line of this morph.
Yeah, exactly.
It's totally unrelated to the only one that ever existed before it. How does that happen?
It's a miracle. It just popped out of the guy who worked for the guy with the only one in existence.
That's a conspiracy theory. You're drawing too much of similar.
Alan Rapace told me he never hires reptile people to work in his reptile business. He just hires, people who need a job and that kind of thing. But I would say, kind of that idea of having the freedom to leave and to go, herp, would be really important to me. And it would be hard to be kind of tied down to a business that is very difficult to leave. But
Sure.
If you're big enough, you have employees, maybe that's not as big an issue, but definitely the rodents need more care than the mammals.
Yeah. Yep. So my next point, and this is one thing that struck me early on doing rodents, is that it's a breeding project that works.
Mm-hmm.
They breed.
It's not hard.
That's not in question. If you have male rodents and female rodents, you will get more rodents. So, obviously with reptiles, one of the biggest potential issues is, nothing bred. Now what? Now where's my mortgage coming from? So there's a lot more room for error as far as purely just a production standpoint. And also, in my opinion, scaling rodents is infinitely easier than scaling reptile production. While and also you can really make it a formulaic system that you can plug and play people into different areas of, or really have down to a flow where with reptiles, you can't always clean that tub on Tuesday and feed that snake on Thursday, and that doesn't always have to happen. So while it is not always easy to get people excited to work with rodents, I personally have been, because I've had people work for me cleaning both rodents and reptiles, have been infinitely more comfortable with somebody doing stuff with rodents than with the reptiles, because it's much less specialized work, and the room for error with the rodents is a lot higher. And especially there are, you can have somebody all day cleaning tubs. Mm-hmm. And if they're not super clean, okay, they're going to be dirty again anyway. It's a rodent facility.
Right.
Where with reptiles, even to the point where if that tub isn't cleaned properly by that employee, you could be passing a disease on to another animal in your collection. And then on that tip, from a biosecurity standpoint, especially if you start with a clean colony, you don't need to bring in outside genetics to that colony. Rodents don't experience inbreeding depression in the same way that reptiles will. If you have your 10 carpet pythons, and that's going to be your carpet pythons forever. They're eventually gonna have two heads and will corkscrew around, and it's not going to go well. So the amount of specified labor involved in rodents is far less than will be needed for reptiles. There are instances where that will not be the case. If it's a bunch of baby ball pythons or cages of crested geckos and you're putting the little food dish in there, sure. But at least with the animals that I have and I like, be far less trusting of somebody to come in and do that job for me, and me trust that it's being done well and in a way where the business will continue to be profitable and generate that revenue.
Yeah, it definitely takes more experts in specific areas to make a reptile business float versus rodent business. You don't have to have much understanding about that. Yeah. Now, I have noticed too with breeding rodents that if they go for extended periods without water, or that something happens where a line gets blocked, then you basically lose that colony or that rack, depending on where the blockage is, or if one floods, then you lose that, but then the others go without water for a few hours, and that could cause some problems for long-term breeding, or they chew on their pups or whatever, it can be a little messy and nasty that way too. I'm not to say that, things don't happen with reptiles, but it just seems like
not to that extreme
thing can kind of balloon out for an extended period of time. And, I guess where they're kind of being bred as feeders, maybe they're not so precious, so you don't have to, limp them along or seek veterinary treatment. You just euthanize them and feed them off and move on, that kind of thing. That might sound callous, but, where something's being bred for food, that's less of a consideration than when something's being bred as a pet. And so, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. Man, I just had it for a second and then it went. Okay, got it back. Got it. Okay.
I didn't know.
But
okay,
kind of, it relates to what you were saying. If there's an issue of a rack getting, like with rodents, for instance, a rack flooding out, you lose that entire section. Or, even with like insects, if you have like a room of roaches and it overheats and boom, all the roaches are gone. Unless you have all of your eggs in that basket, like let's say you lose 5%, that's a lot, but like, let's say you lose 5% of your colony, kind of keeps going. It replaces, there's a little bit of a dip. If you have a rack that an employee doesn't, or let's say it plugs it, I had this happen to me, plugs the rack right into the wall instead of into the thermostat. You come in the next day, every animal is dead in that rack. That's a catastrophic event for your business. So loss is much more easily recovered with feeders because the replacement rate is that much higher, and then everything around it kind of keeps going despite what happened there. And, let's say in that instance, God forbid this happened to anybody with that rack, those were your breeder males. Now you have all your females and no males to go with them. With feeders, the likelihood of a small isolated event having a widespread effect is much lower than with reptiles. And then also when you look at just like the large numbers you're working with on an individual with feeders compared to reptiles, more error will probably occur, but that error will probably affect a smaller percentage of the whole than it would with reptiles.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious, having experience in the rodent breeding business, how often did those kind of things occur? Like where you had setback? I mean, did you get to the point where the business just kind of ran smoothly, or were there always issues to deal with and problems to solve, or did it become kind of more routine after a certain amount of time?
So I'd love to see the perfect feeder operation, because that would be a marvel. So short answer would be no. But the way that I see it, it all comes down to how you set the groundwork up front. Mm-hmm. If you're patchwork this and that, homemade rack this, water line you rigged up from there that you didn't originally plan on, the less thought that goes into the initial planning stage, the more issues you'll end up with. And I'm arguing against myself right now, but it just is what it is. I would assume it would have to be the same with crickets or roaches or mealworms or whatever. Where with reptiles, we get away with lots of different enclosure. People breed $20,000 snakes and $15 Rubbermaid tubs from Target. There's no feeder equivalent of that. The values in the infrastructure, where conversely the reptiles, the values in the breeding stock itself most of the time. So yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, issues will happen, particularly with rodents, because of the whole line chewing phenomenon that has plagued everybody who's ever bred rodents, where they have access to water lines. But I think there's not a lot you can do once you've already set yourself up for that. If you have systems of enclosed water lines, you kind of need that from the start. If you just are working with the typical setup, then it just comes down to management of it. If you're running at a larger scale and you have turnover of employees, there was always an uptick when a new employee started of flooded tubs. I'll say that much. I wonder if there's a correlation there. But it's just really having that regimented system and doing everything you can to eliminate those potential variables. But unfortunately, it's live animals, and no matter if it's a rat, a snake, whatever it is, there's going to be that room for error. And the way I see it, you minimize that by doing the work up front before you even start your operation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just wondered, like, I'm curious, like, how much innovation has occurred with rodent breeding. You would think there'd be plenty of literature on, nutrition and kind of the best balance or the best breeding strategies and things like that. But I also thought too, like, if I was going to do a professional rodent breeding business, I'd probably put, grommeted holes on the back of the tub. So if there was a leak, it would come out of the back of the tub, go down a drainage system into a bucket with a sensor that turned on an alarm. So you knew, like, right then that there was an alarm and and something was flooding.
Right. And that's like what I was just saying about having that system in place ahead of time. For instance, we over time, like an idea that Forrest had that worked, but then failed for a different reason was, okay, let's drill a small hole into the bottom of the tub for that reason. If that tub starts to flood, you're not going to lose that tub. There's going to be a whole lot of cleanup because every tub below it will be dirty. But then that hole wasn't perfect. It didn't have a metal guard around it. Chew, rats everywhere, more floods everywhere. So that makeshift fix ended up causing more harm than good. Freedom Breeder is doing racks these days with enclosed water lines, kind of within a stainless steel cover. I haven't used those personally, but I think that's incredible. I wonder what the accessibility is like to the line underneath, because inevitably nozzles will still corrode over time, especially if you have harder water in your area. But so I unfortunately, at least with the current systems and whatnot, a flood-free rodent facility seems to be about impossible. But there are definitely steps that can be taken to minimize that risk. And I think a lot of it comes down to that just a lot of rodent breeders aren't quite so willing to share information with each other. Because, it's definitely, I would say overall, maybe a little bit more cutthroat than some areas of the reptile industry where I doubt a lot of these big rodent companies are friends with each other, where, all of the top ball python breeders or carpet python breeders or bearded dragon breeders seem to be at least friendly with one another. But then with the rodents, there's a whole other aspect of the laboratory industry. And that kind of what we do stemmed from the laboratory world, just kind of modified a little bit. And obviously you can kind of compare it to almost like the zoology or zoological keeping compared to private keeping. Even less so where I don't think those people want anything to do with us. They see us as rednecks cooking meth in trailers on our property.
And they're a pharmaceutical company.
Right, exactly. And they're providing for a totally different, their rodents are serving an entire different purpose. But then the genetic tracking and the science that goes into those rodents is just, it's so extreme that those of us who are on the outside could never have any idea, because when Pfizer calls you up and says, hey, I need 1,000 of these, of this strain, of this age, of this weight, you're going to deliver that, because that's, it's one of the most powerful companies in the entire world. You're going to make sure that they're happy. Where if they went to any rodent breeder who's providing for the industry and be like, hey, I need same specificities, it'd be like, huh? Why? We sell medium rats. You want mediums? So
we're ordering hundreds of mice at a time at our lab, and they're $30, $50 a pop for a single mouse, so our rodent bills are insane at the university. For one grant, I think we spent $40,000 for 2 or 3 studies in rodents, and it's insane.
I'm not shocked, but I think most people who are listening are probably shocked right now at that figure.
And they're upset when the price goes up by 10 cents on a fuzzy or something. And they're not paying $50 a piece, but then again, these are, pathogen free, and they're, raised in clean environments and things like that.
They have predispositions to different diseases or whatnot, or they're diabetic, or they're
humanized. They have human cells growing in them, pretty insane. And those ones are probably on the order of $150, $200 a piece. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah. But then another kind of influence that the lab industry has had on the rodent industry for the sake of reptiles and other animals, that's where the diets all came from. And the diets are for laboratory growth.
Mm-hmm.
So
not for breeding growth necessarily.
Yeah. It's just, it's like, okay, we need to get this rodent to this size and be able to run these tests on it. This is the diet we provided for it. It has nothing to do with nutrition for animals. This never in their thought process was, well, this might be fed to a snake or a monitor lizard or a crocodile one day. What would be good for that animal? I haven't looked in major depth of the different diets, both laboratory and kind of more commercial diets, but I can't imagine they're all that different from one another.
I was talking to a vet friend at the university, and he's a falconer, and he was working with a guy who was one of the biggest producers of falcons in the world. I can't remember, where the guy was from, but he had this huge drop off and decline in his falcon breeding. The eggs weren't coming out very, viable, and just things weren't working. And he's like, I haven't changed anything. I've got the same supplier of quail and all this kind of stuff. And so they went to the quail supplier. He said, you check with them, see if they've had any changes. And so the quail supplier, no, we haven't done anything different. We buy food from the same place. And so they went to the feed lot, and they said, have you had any changes? And they said, well, we switched this ingredient from a different supplier. And so they traced all the way back, also through looking at some of the eggs and some of the quail to show that they were having some nutrient deficiencies because they switched a product, and the product that they got was inferior to the one they were using. And it was, cheaper, but it was inferior. And so that resulted in that kind of chain effect of having poor falcon production. So, it is there is kind of a lot riding on that. Now, you do hear a lot of horror stories of people buying rodents that make their snake sick, or a snake dies after it eats a rodent, or even people become sick from the rodents that they're buying from these suppliers. And I still wonder if Nick Mutton got anything when he ate that frozen thawed rat at one of the carpet fests is for a fundraising event. But you wonder about, I'm like, I don't know if I'd eat a frozen thawed rat from Rodent Pro or something, but anyway, so those kind of things can, it might be difficult to trace back to a specific rodent supplier, but that has happened, and there can be those issues from that.
I think it's very difficult. There was the case back, I think it was even prior to 2010 of, I think it was salmonella from rodents that were coming over from China. That's pretty obvious what the cause is right there. But in the way that I see it, I think the biggest kind of X factor that no one really considers, and really based on just lack of the information being out there, is how these rodents are stored, how they're transported, how many times they're transported, how old truly are they when they're getting to your animal. Because there's a lot of, boom, this supplier gets this amount. They then sell to their 10 customers, who then sell to their each 10 customers. And before supplier one got the big shipment of rodents, they maybe had been frozen for 4 months prior to that. Did they thaw in transit to this place? Did this person's freezer not get cold enough? What are the, and when they ended up in the pet store, did an employee forget to put them away that night and put them away the next morning? Yeah. Oftentimes when people are just buying feeders and they think it's innocuous, there's no way to know, what is that rat gone through? How many hands has it passed through? Where did it originate from? And less about the source itself, because a lot of these rodents are being raised the same way on the same diets, same everything. They're the same rodents. A lot of the rodents that are being bred are just originally lab strains that have been out of the lab for 50 years or whatever. But what happened to that rodent after it died? Between then and when you fed it to your snake, what happened to it? And I don't have the answer, but I think that's a question that you need to ask. And when you're choosing a feeder supplier, choose one that you know can verify, yeah, it was euthanized here. It's been in the freezer for so long, stayed at this consistent temperature, got shipped to you at this consistent temperature with the dry ice, and you're good to go. This rodent didn't change hands 4 times, get thawed out twice before I got it.
Yeah.
So, and unfortunately, no one's going to tell you that second story. So there's going to be a little bit of discernment involved in figuring that out for yourself. But
usually it's
that too.
Usually it's the cheaper ones that are cheap for a reason. I guess it's the same thing with breeding reptiles. Is, you know, a good deal is often not worth the hassle, you know, because you're going to have some other issue. It's like, why are they selling an adult for so cheap? And, you know, sometimes it works out, but sometimes it can be catastrophic too. So you got to be careful, I guess, in either category, reptiles or rodents. If there's a good deal, it's probably for a reason, you know, and it might not be such a good deal in the long run.
Yeah. You know, and all of those are reasons why, as you said, what you do breeding your own rodents. I breed African soffers and mice. I don't have a rat production going on right now, but, you know, for anyone out there who has even had the thought in their mind, I would encourage giving it a shot to producing your own feeders. You're eliminating so many potential variables. And, you know, there's research into the breakdown of micronutrients, vitamins, and minerals from the freezing process of rodents. So, I mean, just from a health standpoint, a fresh killed rodent is definitely better than a frozen thawed rodent, most certainly better than a rodent that was frozen 6 months ago that you just thawed out. So, and it's not for everybody, and people are busy and people are allergic to rodents, and, you know, it won't suit anybody, but if it does suit you, even to have a few colonies to feed babies or something like that, you know, I encourage it, because you can take so much more control of a process that innately you have very little control over.
Yeah. I mean, I do enjoy breeding rodents when there's no floods and when they haven't chewed out of their tubs and when they're, you know, those kind of things. That makes it a big pain in the neck. But otherwise, it's not too bad. You know, it's nice to have that supply. Sure. But I do think it does take kind of a, you know, you do have to kind of be on top of things. I mean, it's the same with the reptiles, but you need to, you know, euthanize a colony. You need to kind of have an idea of how old the animals are and make sure you're cycling through, so you're not feeding a bunch of adults and that aren't having any babies, and you can't get too attached. You got to feed them off if they're not producing enough and things like that. You know, I'm sure there's some kind of good formula to use, or, you know, what ratio to use and things like that. But I don't know. I don't know how much that is in these professional rodent breeding, you know, or reptile supply places, but and, you know, feeders can be a challenge. The crickets and things that they're difficult to raise. And I think there are some really good cricket producers out there that have been doing it for a long time, but we did see what happened when they got the cricket virus that went through and kind of decimated the cricket industry for quite a while, and switched it over to those more aggressive and the banded crickets for a while that were being produced. But I think, you know, that's kind of another thing. You know, I think there might be room for improvement where we could expand on the number of different prey species that are being offered. You know, if somebody bred anoles or bred, you know, other some kind of small snake species as feeders, you know, it could also increase the number of species of reptiles we could also keep and breed. And I'm sure there might be a market for something cool like that, you know, maybe not on a scale as large as rodents or crickets, but, you know, there should be plenty of, I mean, that Snakes of the World book by O'Shea, looking through that book and going, holy crap, that is a cool looking snake. Oh, it eats blind snakes. Okay. That's, you know, no wonder nobody's ever had that in captivity or whatever, or you don't see those, or I've never seen that before, that kind of thing. So.
Yeah, you'd need someone with a lot of money who's just willing to waste it to start an operation like that, of providing a specialty feeder for a market that doesn't exist yet, or is small, just for the hopes of starting something up, which is what sucks, because unfortunately, you know, these days, if it's not mice, rats, crickets, dubia roaches and maybe mealworms, you're probably not breeding a profitable feeder. I can't imagine, maybe quail too now these days. But I doubt you could do quail at the same scale you could do rats or mice. I don't know for sure, but that's just a guess based on what I've seen over time.
Yeah, I bought a quail breeder rack, and it's supposed to, each level is supposed to be able, I mean, it's not very big, but each level is supposed to house like up to 50 adults. I'm like, 50 adults. Dang. And they would just lay eggs. The eggs would roll down to the front, you could incubate some, eat some, whatever you want to do, so it seemed like, they're moving, making progress in that area as well, where you could potentially set up a viable commercial entity. I mean, chickens are a great example. There's plenty of knowledge in the chicken industry. And I mean, chicks are pretty, especially male chicks are culled pretty much instantly after you can tell if they're male or female. And so, buying bulk male chicks is probably pretty inexpensive, but is that a great feeder? Who can say?
Right. Yeah. Take that chick, that day old chick that's never, had a speck of food in its life, and compare that to an equivalent size Coturnix quail from a nutritional standpoint. I don't think you can compare the two. But then look at the price of that, and that chick might be a third of the price of the quail. So.
And it would be nice to get, other feeder species. It's interesting that we've basically just have the house mouse and the European rat as our, and maybe soft furs, but they're not bred in much quantity. We haven't quite got those to the same point as we've got the house mouse and
for sure
the European rat. But I wonder, like multi-mammate rats or something like that. But I guess there's also agricultural concerns of if they get loose, they might take over and, plague the planet. So that's a risk, with feeders as well. As, I mean, I get nervous that if my rodents get out, my neighbors are going to get upset, and I've had like, I had my weanling rat bin, they chewed out. And so I had like 30 or 40 rats around my rodent shed. And so I put poison out, I put traps out, all that kind of stuff. And then the neighbor's like, we found this big rat in our yard. Do you think it's one of yours? I'm like, oh, probably. I'm sorry. Don't touch it. I'll come get it. That kind of thing. So, they're, but I suppose if I had a stray python, they might not, be as excited either. So
probably not.
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny.
Biosecurity is probably important for both reptile or feeder.
Yes, most certainly.
Well, any other big points you can think of? I'm sure you have.
Oh, sure. Let me.
Yeah.
look at my notes that I
have. I thought the other side, you made a really good point about having stability. Everybody's going to need feeders and not everybody's necessarily going to need reptiles. But I do think that reptile breeders are crazy enough that, even during a recession, they're probably still going to try to find a way to buy a reptile, but
sure,
depending on what kind you have or what kind you have, what they really want. But
right.
Maybe not. Yeah, but definitely there's a risk that way. The other, I guess, risk for maybe both businesses is, you don't have insurance. You have to buy insurance or supply your employees with insurance, and that can be very costly and difficult compared to just getting a job and having the company, provide you insurance, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
it's and retirement and benefits and those kind of things. It's hard to keep somebody long term if you're not, able to offer benefits or insurance, that kind of thing. So you might have a high turnover, and that applies to either business.
Sure. So. Yeah, another one that just popped into my mind. With reptiles, I feel like there are more tasks that are required to be a reptile breeder that are not breeding reptiles. meaning if you can no longer be a nameless, faceless reptile business. You just can't. You got to be all over social media. You got to be doing the podcast. You got to be going to show. I mean, not even necessarily going to shows, but it'll help, but not nearly as much as the online stuff goes. You really can just be ABC feeders, and here's my price list. I'm a little bit cheaper than the guy down the road. Buy from me, and you'll get business that way. You might not get as big as you want to that way, but if you're ABC ball pythons, here's my Enchi pinstripe, you're never going to sell an animal. I feel like these days, especially when it comes to like the more popular stuff like ball pythons or crested geckos or whatever, people aren't really buying the animal. They're buying the person who produced the animal. This isn't my leopard clown pied. This is my Justin Kabelka leopard clown pied, or my Bob's Balls leopard clown pied. And I'm part of the Patreon, and like, you're buying into the community, you're buying the experience. You're not just buying that animal where, I mean, I don't know if there's a parallel with feeders. It's like, yeah, this is the rat that's in my freezer. I'm not part of a community, like I'm not going on the African soft fur retreat to Hawaii. I paid $1,000, like,
right.
So
I think there might be a caveat to that with the, I think about Josh's Frogs and like all the support things that they have with that, like the leaves, they're having people, they're buying oak leaves from somebody, and they'll ship them a box or bag full of oak leaves, and then they repackage them, put their Josh's Frogs logo, and sell that little bag of leaves for $10, that somebody just sold them, 100 times the amount for $5, So I think that's pretty great innovation, but I think they've worked really hard to kind of make their name, equivalent with the support goods and things for frogs. And,
yeah, I mean, Josh's Frogs might be like the most like admirable business model in the history of the reptile industry. And
that and Alan Rapace. I mean, Alan basically brought back an extinct gecko and made food for it that you could mix up in your kitchen, and then made a huge industry out of that. So Alan's a fantastic businessman, and I'm sure Josh's Frogs, Josh, is also a very good businessman. So, and I think that's either reptiles or feeders. You've got to have good business sense. I don't think you're going to succeed if you don't have some understanding of, we need to put out less money than we bring in, that sort of thing. So.
I think another great example is Rich Goldzung at Reptile Basics. It's a big company, probably a lot bigger than a lot of people would think. And it's synonymous with a handful of products. You can look at a hide box and you're like, oh, that's Reptile Basics. Tongs and stuff, how they distribute all the Redline Science products, they're at all the shows. They're very professional with their shipping and their packaging, their customer service. They run a really tight ship over there. And what's great about, we didn't really talk about supplies as much as rodents, but that parahemostat isn't going to die. You're not gonna have a flood in your hide boxes.
And every reptile keeper needs to ship their stuff in a deli cup with holes in it, So finding that deli cup and with holes, and that box with the insulation. I mean, you can cut your own insulation, but when was the last time you did that? Unless you had some special order or something. You're going to buy I guess if you're, if you want to save money, you do it that way, because those costs have gone up too, so
sure.
But still that makes it simple. Oh, you want to ship a reptile? Here's the way to do it. And this is what you need.
Yeah.
You want to go to a show? You got to have this display and this cup and that kind of thing. So, yeah.
Yeah. But then the immediate con to that is the barrier to entry on a business model like that is so much higher. Even with rodents, you can theoretically build up $1 million rodent company from one rack in a bedroom. Theoretically speaking, you're not going to create Reptile Basics or Triple L or Josh's Frogs, you know, from a supply standpoint in that same fashion. Probably not anymore, especially with the really established brands. You know, you probably need a significant 6-figure to 7-figure initial investment, a warehouse, distribution, forklifts. You know, there's a lot of all the racking that goes involved, managers, employees. You know, that's not something that you're starting out of your garage.
Yeah, how much is a mold for like a hide or a Rubbermaid container? You know, it's a significant investment, like 10 to 20 grand.
Yeah, like tens of thousands of dollars. And then like the injection mold machines that actually produce those are like 100 grand to $500,000, depending on how big that machine is. You know, there's levels of this where, you know, you need to either leverage your entire life or know someone with a lot of money to be able to even think about doing this stuff.
I've seen a few people kind of make that transition. TSK, Dan and Colette Sutherland, they kind of switched over to having more dry goods and things. And they bought, you know, the punch to put holes in deli cups and things like that, you know, or where they had a rodent business and they kind of traded it out they sold the rodent business and bought the supplies side. And I think, you know, your supplies aren't flooding. Your supplies aren't, you know, you might have problems storing them or you need more space to store stuff and things like that. And that can have its own challenges, but you know, they're not dying on you necessarily.
Yeah.
You might have a bad batch or if your machine malfunctions, you know, that kind of thing. So I guess there's challenges and struggles with just about any business you're going to run.
Or like another one that, you know, similarly has kind of carved out a nice little niche for itself as far as, you know, streamlining their production model is ARS. You know, in Indianapolis, I live 15 minutes away from ARS. I, you know, went there on a number of different occasions, you know, to whether it was racks or rodents or whatever had me over there. Pristine warehouse, super clean, organized, but stuff comes in and they assemble it or repackage it and send it back out. You know, their racks aren't being manufactured in house. They're basically just distributing a bunch of their own products that are not being produced there. And if you can make that work, more power to you, because that's an awesome way to do things where, you know, there's no stinky rat facility or you're not, you know, molding metal, you know, you don't have a stainless factory, you know, like that's, you know, you're working with cardboard boxes and forklifts and pallet jacks and, you know, maybe the occasional drill. It's a pretty good way to do it. But again, it's another one where you're not, you have to get to a level like what you said about the Sutherlands getting out of the rodents and getting into supplies, but they had a lot of capital to dump into that move to supplies from selling a rodent business. So I guess maybe the long and short of it is, you know, take one thing to progress to another thing where you don't have to do the dirty work anymore. But it's to the point where
maybe the dry goods kind of trumps both the reptile and the feeders.
we got to the answer. It's the non-living things. It's, you know, sell books and stuff, and But then again, it's just, you know, I'm not doing that out of my house. Yeah, and if I were to, I don't know if I'd have time to do my reptiles anymore. Or I need to sell 60% of them or hire someone full time. And then we come back to the issues we were presenting earlier with, how do I know this person's doing it right or keeping all my animals where they're supposed to be? Because I don't know what I would do if I came home one day and I realized that one holdback scrub python isn't in his tub anymore. That would be like, whatever I'm doing to take me out of the house isn't worth that. You know, like that's, especially at the end of the day, all of this is about the reptiles. You know, any rodent company isn't really existing for its own sake. It's existing to feed into this thing that we all care so much about. Same with the supplies. So I don't know, to me personally at this point, I want to do things in a way where it will balance out with what I really want to be doing at the end of the day. And I don't think I have it right. I think I probably have far too many reptiles, and you know, there's days where I'm just like, sitting on the couch at the end of the day. Like I could do 6 more hours of work right now and it's 11 o'clock. Like it's terrible, but you know, I guess that's all part of the journey, is kind of finding out how that balance works for you.
Yeah. And that's a struggle in and of itself, you know, like I'm sure a lot of people who've been doing this for a long time have a lot of, you know, but I don't think that's easily transferable knowledge. I think a lot of it you have to do through experience and you know, just figuring out yourself and seeing what works for you and that kind of thing. So,
yeah. And I was lucky to be around people who, when I was like probably about 18, 19 years old, who had produced reptiles on the largest scales that were ever achieved. And they're like, life was terrible. I was miserable every single day. That was the worst time of my life, is when I had 10,000 breeder reptiles in my facility and 10 employees. And, you know,
yeah, because you're not out there with the reptiles. You're on the computer making sales, or you're making a video, or you're putting.
Even if you are, you have to do these 15 racks today. You can't sit and admire an animal for a minute.
Exactly, you're not enjoying them. It's just a commodity, or a farm more so than enjoyment.
And that was another a con towards reptiles that I had written down in case it came up, was when you go to, in terms of scaling, the ethical battle, I feel like, comes forward a lot faster than it does with feeders, because we all kind of, I mean, anybody who isn't a vegan accepts that farming exists, agriculture is real, this has been going on forever, there's the food chain, and this is how things work. But then when you get into scaling reptiles, and the purpose of those animals is not for them to die. Okay, when do your morals take over and be like, I'm producing these animals for the wrong reason? You know, there's multiple sides of the argument, but the percentage of animals that are born every year that make it to that next year, I got to imagine it's a lot lower than we'd like it to be. So when you're thinking about having a reptile breeding business and you want to make money doing it, okay, well, where's the line where it's you're doing right by the animals and then you cross it over to exploitation? I think that's much harder to bridge than it is with feeders, because the way I see it, someone who's done it, you know, it's not for the faint of heart. If you have a weak stomach, don't do it. You know, if you cry easily at nasty sights, don't do it. But at the end of the day, the way I saw it was, if the animals have a good life, if they're treated well, we can provide the best, you know, parameters, and then they're, you know, euthanized humanely, and as many of them as possible can go to be food for some other animal, probably doing it the right way. You know, but then when you're breeding reptiles, unless you're breeding like feeder crested geckos or morning geckos or something like that, you know, there's an entire different set of ethics that you're having to wrestle with. I don't think there really is one answer to that. And I think that might be an entire episode of, you know, scale question, but that's a big part that's involved, the way I see it, with reptiles, that is less involved with feeders per se.
And it's also becoming more and more apparent with, you know, all the increase of online presence, and people know a lot more about your business than they used to. And so, you know, if there's something that's going wrong, or somebody wants to come and see your facility and, you know, that, hey, this guy's not doing it great, you know, that word travels fast, and you could, you know, your business could suffer. And so it really is an important thing, becoming more important as well. I mean, it's always been important, but you know what I mean? Like, yeah,
it just a lot more visibility these days, where someone like Samson Pruitt was getting away with it until the social media era. You know, until smartphones, when an employee could go snap, 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 snap. You're fucked now. You know, in the 90s, he could abuse his retics all he wants, and he's tucked away in the middle of bumfuck wherever, and you know, no one's going to find out. The old guard of that community, they don't care enough to say anything, or they may be treating their animals the same way. And so there's some virtue to it, you know, where people can be called out on their bullshit. And if it holds everyone to a higher standard, then good. But and I think another evolution is like the large scale reptile production model. If it's not for the sake of like supplying pet stores, if you're going direct to consumer, I can't imagine it works too well. I just can't imagine you make money if you need multiple employees to run your reptile business. I don't think any of these people are making money.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see the actual books of some of these businesses, that and I think, it is, you're also limited because, I mean, not everybody wants to buy reptiles, and we see, periods of fluctuation. And so I saw a really nice talk by Alan Rapace it was given to an Australian crowd. And he was saying, in America, the economy can support maybe, 100 full-time breeders. And, he did all the math and kind of figuring out, basically what it would take. And he said, you guys have a tenth of our population. And so you can have 10 full-time breeders in all of Australia, which is the same size as the United States. And so, and you see that over there, it's very difficult to make a go as a full-time reptile breeder in Australia. And so, I think that needs to be considered over here too. I think a lot of people get hoop dreams, they breed their a couple things and then they say, okay, now I want to do this full time. And they just start ramping up and buying stuff. And like you said, that, ramping up is not as easy as it seems. It's like, oh, I did well with a pair. I'm sure I'll do well with 10 pairs or 100 pairs. It doesn't scale up the same way as rodents, like you said earlier. So that's something to be aware of, if you're thinking of trying that out.
Yeah, and I think the hoop stream comparison, it's a great one, and unfortunately, it's because that's how the new people are sold. It's not look at this animal; it makes a great pet for this reason, that reason. I love how this behavior is about this animal. It's look at my facility of stainless steel and solid gray tubs. I make this much money. Here's my Porsche. That's buy my snake for me. Like that's, I don't know. That to me it's gross. Like
it's like a pyramid scheme. That's kind of what, it seems like a lot of this is like, you too can be like me if you buy this snake and breed them together, and I think that's kind of, I think it's going away a little bit, and I think it was mainly a product of the ball python industry when you saw $20,000 snakes, $60,000 snakes.
You knew I was talking about ball pythons there. That's crazy.
But yeah, I mean, I think, but it's bled over into other areas. And like you said, you're selling your business model, or you're selling your personality rather than you're selling your animals. And I mean, I see that at the shows. Like I've got, cool crested geckos and I'm selling them for $50, but they go over to this table and buy one for $350 because they know the breeder, it has some lineage or some fun little morph name on it. And I'm like, it looks the exact same as the one I've got at my table, and it's 6 times the price or whatever. So crazy,
which is unfortunate. It's just like kind of the nature of consumerism. It's why we all have, a lot of people have iPhones, or they want their European designer bag that looks the same as whatever you're going to get from Target or whatnot. But, you feel more special that way, which is okay with perishable, non-living goods. It's okay with a t-shirt to be like, buy this for $200 because you'll be special. But like when you apply those same principles to a living animal, it is, it's like kind of like French bulldogs. It's kind of, I feel like that's a similar thing. Like it's a status symbol, and it's this, they're very cute, but they're abominations. They're not real dogs.
Ouch! I just got a French bulldog.
Every time I do my French bulldog speech,
I traded snakes for it, but
someone's like, I have one. No, they're awesome little dogs. They're very cute,
great dogs. But you're right. I mean, I heard there's a large breeder somewhere here in the valley near me, and they produce all this, all these French bulldogs, but they have some huge loss rate, like 20 to 30% loss rate of puppies. I'm like, how is that a thing? You know, like I thought dog breeders were all over puppy mills or whatever. You know, I would think a 30% loss rate is pretty high, but maybe it's just the nature of the, you know, abomination of the French bulldog. My children would agree with you, by the way. They don't like him much, but
I mean, they're very cute, but any animal that can't give natural births, you've done something to that animal.
To question it. Yeah.
You know, that's it's been taken into a new form. But you know, one thing that I kind of like about how the reptile industry has gone is, you know, like the transition to naturalistic keeping and big enclosures and stuff. Like there's obviously a big debate there, and I don't think there's a right or wrong answer, but I think with it comes a mindset of less being more. And you know, I think the future is breeders that are on a smaller scale, are producing really high-end animals and are attracting a decent price tag for those animals. So if you sell, you know, 30, 40 animals a year at $2,000 a piece, you're making more than most people make. And you could probably do that out of a couple bedrooms in your house, and maybe even one, depending on what those animals are. If they're geckos or small colubrids or something like that, you know.
And we also are seeing the import industry kind of decline, and
sure.
A lot of countries aren't allowing exports. And so those captive bred animals are going to be more important, and the prices are going to go up. I mean, we saw it with the monkey-tailed skinks and a number of other, you know, things where once they stop imports, everybody all of a sudden realizes how cool the animal was, because now it's no longer a throwaway pet that you get for $20 at the pet shop. You know, now it's a really cool animal because it's worth money, or, you know, it's rare or whatever. You know, you don't see them anymore. So,
I mean, I've benefited from that directly with the scrub pythons. You know, they were, people tell you stories. I mean, I bet Rob has a million stories of the $100 class Telepus on and on Cam's list in 2005, you know, and now that snake today is $3,000 or something like that. You know, which it sucks for eyes to come onto a species because they're rare all of a sudden in the hobby. But I feel like that can then go one of two ways. Okay, you have the attention. Now, how do you sell this? Is it like they're rare now, so if you get into them now and you breed them, you're going to make a lot of money? Or look at how amazing these are. Look at all the different natural color variations. This is what I like about their body structure and how they move, and set up in a display enclosure like this, you can witness these behaviors. You know, to me, I think that's a stronger pitch in the end than the money, because it's more sustainable, because people who are buying them are like, wow, I want to experience that. Wow, I love this animal. It's the way that I get to interact with it is super special. That to me is sustainable. You know, I wonder how many ball python breeders love the physiology of the ball python. You know, I mean, I have ball python, not many. I only have a few pets, but like I'll always have them. They're just not the most engaging snakes. You know, it's kind of shocking how, it's not shocking because of how it happened, but it's a shame how colubrids were all the hype. Ball pythons came and washed over colubrids, and now these days there aren't even really corn snake breeders like on scale. You know,
it's made a little bit of a resurgence, but nothing like it was 10, 15 years ago. That was the show, was all colubrids all the time, and maybe one table with pythons. You know, now it's exactly the opposite. You know.
Yeah, and with all, you know, all the variety of milks and kings and all the different rat snakes, and, you know, old and world, new world.
I welcome this new, you know, reptile industry. I think we were kind of sold a false bill of goods or whatever, where we, you know, everybody. I need to have like rows and rows of racks, and I need to be like Brian Barczyk or, you know, whatever big name breeder you want to name. That just has thousands of animals in rack systems. And, you know, I thought everybody kind of thought, oh, that's the pinnacle. That's what we need to accomplish. And I'm hoping that's kind of going away. And that, like you said, we're moving towards throwaway or, you know, more expensive animals, but also fewer, nicer setups, you know, larger enclosures, things like that. I think that's all a good thing. And,
for sure.
Less is more. You know, you can really, especially if you're a hobbyist breeder, you don't need a every single gene or every single, and also I love the species that have no morphs, that are just the snake, and you appreciate it for what it is. You might have some selectively bred traits or something, but there's doesn't get washed over by morphs.
Yeah. To me, the specialty that goes into like a line breeding project of a wild type is so much more exciting than het this and het that. There's just like, to me, this, okay, I'm looking at my rack of ball pythons and these are my morphs. Okay. They're beautiful snakes. They look awesome. But if I'm looking at my 8 cages of my barneck scrub pythons I've been raising up for a few years, and I think this one's base color will do well with the pattern of this one, and the way that these two, they have weird neck patterns that I haven't seen many others. What if I breed them together? Will that pattern extend further down the body? I don't really have those answers, but to me, that's what's fun about it, is I want to find out. I want to know what the F4 of the animals that I've been raising up are going to look like. And I see other people kind of going down that path as well. And if someone offered me a pied barneck scrub python tomorrow, I would sell my car. Like I'm not hating on morphs. I'd buy that snake in a heartbeat. But I think it's all about balancing it out. Like not necessarily one over the other. Find virtue in all of these different aspects of herpetoculture. And one thing that I do see with the new wave keepers, the naturalistic style keepers, is just a total rejection of the old school, so to speak, of these guys are all so wrong. They were animal abusers. They were this or that. It's like, you're here because of them. Be grateful. You can improve on whatever you want to improve on, but know where you came from. And respect the groundwork that was laid for you. And there's a lot to be learned from how things were done in the past. And it works too. I think that's one thing.
By necessity. It's not like, sometimes they didn't have much of a choice, or, that kind of thing. Or they just didn't know. And, there was no way to know.
Right. And that's the only way you find out is by trial and error over time. So I don't like that part of it. I think that, we should all, obviously if someone's abusing their animals, that's a different thing. But just because someone kept in simplistic setups on paper or whatever, I don't know. I don't like the sector of the hobby
the shaming.
Exactly. The bullying,
you don't do it like I do.
The public virtue signaling of, I have pathos in my cages, so I must be so much better than the people who were breeding snakes for 40 years. And I'm 22 with my isopods in there. It's yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I just think we all have a lot to learn from each other, and anyone who has that closed-minded perspective is hurting themselves at the end of the day.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think this has been a really nice discussion. I really appreciate your input, and you brought up some really nice points. But hopefully you guys listening got some good stuff out of this. So how can people find you? Where are you at online?
Yeah, so right now really just Facebook and Instagram. Facebook is just Steven Kush, and then my Instagram is Scrub Shepherd. So
okay,
where you find me.
Nice. I've been enjoying your podcast too. Why don't you throw that information out there too?
Yeah. Every Wednesday night it's live on the Trap Talk Reptile Network YouTube channel. It's called Kush's Corner. And a lot of different guests, no real theme, just kind of whatever I feel like talking about that week. And I've been having a lot of fun doing it. So I hope some of you guys check it out.
Cool. Yeah, I've been listening to the episodes. I really like you and Patrick geeking out about all the different scrub localities and lineages and stuff like that. It was a lot of fun to listen to, and he's very passionate and very knowledgeable. So it was fun to listen to you guys nerd out there on scrubs. Yeah.
I like those episodes where I end up forgetting that there's an audience. It's like this could have just been a phone call I had with them. That to me, that's also, I like listening to that too. I like just being like a fly on the wall, and just what seemed, was like a conversation between friends at a bar or something like that. That's what I think is really cool about these podcasts, especially with how kind of fractured and online the world is these days. It's even if you're not there, you kind of feel like you are, and that's cool. Yeah. And it's a great way to learn. So, but yeah, I mean, if you guys are down for it, I'd love to have both of you guys on my show individually sometime here in the near future.
Yeah, anytime.
That would be awesome.
I want to give you props too. No offense to anybody that's had Ryan Young on their show, or no offense to Ryan Young himself, but you got some really nice information out of Ryan Young. It was a great conversation, and I really enjoyed that episode. Like, seems like he's a little more tight-lipped on other podcasts that I've heard him on. So you got the conversation flowing, and it was really a great episode as well. So a lot of good stuff.
It's hard to pick favorites, and I've only done 9 episodes, so I'm very new into it. But that might have to be my favorite one I've done so far. That was pretty awesome, because at least for someone like me, I'm primarily doing pythons. Fewer people right now. I mean, I maybe could have had Dave Barker. That may have been the one step above, or and I won't even say that, because I think Ryan is absolutely on that same level. But it's hard to have a better overall python guest than Ryan Young. So that was an awesome
for sure. Yeah. Very knowledgeable guy. He's cool. He's fun to herp with too. I've herped with him a couple times, and he's awesome. A cool guy. So yeah. Well, I don't know. I think that's kind of the fun stuff I've been listening to lately is your podcast. And I really enjoyed Eric and Owen and Lucas interviewing oh my gosh, now the name, I thought about it just a second ago, and now the name
Dale DiNardo.
Dale DiNardo. Yeah, okay. It came to me before Rob saved me, but yeah, Dale's episode was fantastic. That guy is fun to listen to. So if you haven't checked out Morelia Pythons Radio interviewing Dale DiNardo, check it out. He's talking about like egg incubation and stuff.
I haven't made my way to that episode yet, but now I'm definitely going to need to check it out.
Oh, it's fantastic. And he's just fun to listen to, and I mean, extremely knowledgeable. I mean, it was a great episode. I think that's one of my favorite NPR episodes that I've heard.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's fantastic. So, and that's saying a lot, because they've been around for 12 years, 15 years. What are they going on now?
Yeah, I did an episode them like 4 years ago, and I said it to kind of a mixed reaction, but I mean, that they got me through high school, that show.
Yeah.
That was my like Tuesday religious experience, was like looking at my podcast app, like, it's there. All right. Get on the train and throw on the on the way to school. So.
Sure. Yeah. And then if they missed a week or something, you're like, oh no, where'd it go?
What am I going to listen to this week? Of the year. That's terrible.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That was good times. Yeah. I don't know, anything else cool you guys have seen in the last week or so, or more? Any kudos out there? I think the Dale DiNardo episode was probably my highlight of the week. That was fun. I need to listen to it again.
Yeah, I definitely need to check that out. That sounds like an awesome episode for sure. But yeah.
All right. Well, thanks again for coming on, Steven. This has been fantastic and really great. We'll have to have you back. I'm sure you've got a wealth of topics you can cover. So, but we appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, I love doing podcasts, and anytime. As you can tell, I can, for some reason, I'm not this way really when I'm not on a podcast. I don't know what it is, but sometimes I just get rolling on a topic.
I still get it. What was your old when you're what was your old personality that you would do on? Was it
the conservation Carl?
There you go, conservation.
Yeah, I got bullied out of doing that. So I had too many people who I respect being like, I absolutely hate that you do that. I'm like, all right, I'm out.
Yeah. I thought it was pretty funny, but
some people didn't take it.
All right. Well, yeah. Well, thanks to NPR for hosting our podcast, and Eric and Owen and all the good stuff they're doing. And we'll catch you again next week for Reptile Fight Club.
Fight Club.